The carbon credit industry. Tesla have made more than $10 billion selling carbon credits. However, there is a dark side to this industry. Fossil fuel company Shell has sold millions of phantom carbon credits in order to make money through deceit. Hello my friends, welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. Great to see you. Subsidy schemes in Alberta have allowed oil companies to register carbon credits equivalent to twice the volume of CO2 actually captured. So a lot of people, some might say right-wing sector type people, a lot of them have been saying the whole carbon credit industry is a scam. Unfortunately, there is a little bit of truth to these claims. Shell has sold millions of carbon credits tied to CO2 removal that never took place to Canada's largest oil sands companies, raising doubts about a technology seen as crucial to mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the technology, removing CO2 from the industry, there is a lot of technology that is absolutely viable. It does work. However, the problem arises when oil companies or companies lie about the amount of emissions they are actually removing. In this case, that's what Shell has been doing. As part of a subsidy scheme to boost the industry, the Alberta provincial government allowed Shell to register and sell carbon credits equivalent to twice the volume of emissions removed or avoided by its Quest carbon capture facility between 2015 and 2021, the province's registry shows. The subsidy was reduced and then ended in 2022. Now, unfortunately, this is probably the tip of the iceberg. Shell is one of many companies in the world who I believe are probably doing similar things. As a result of this scheme, Shell was able to register 5.7 million credits that had no equivalent CO2 reductions, selling these to top oil sands producers and some of its own subsidiaries. Credits are typically equivalent to 1 ton of CO2. In other words, basically Canada would have been reporting that a certain amount of emissions were happening, but the figure would have been much greater than what they were saying. Some of the largest buyers of the credits were Chevron, Canadian Natural Resources, ConocoPhillips, Imperial Oil, and Suncor Energy. So these companies would have thought that they were, reducing their emissions or offsetting their emissions, but actually they weren't at all. So when you get on your airplane and you pay that extra bit to offset your emissions, are you really offsetting your emissions, or is it a lie? Is it a scam? There's really no way to know. Keith Stewart, a senior energy strategist from Greenpeace Canada, criticized these phantom credits. Selling emissions credits for reductions that never happened literally makes climate change worse, he said. Shell said carbon capture played an important role in helping to decarbonize industry and sectors where emissions cannot be avoided, and that realizing its potential requires creating market incentives now. It was like their justification for lying. It was what I just said. It doesn't add up, in my opinion. Alberta's Environment Ministry said the crediting support scheme had not resulted in additional emissions by industrial polluters. Chevron, Canadian Natural Resources, ConocoPhillips, Imperial Oil, and Suncor Energy have all declined to comment on this story. Energy companies in Canada and around the world are lobbying for more state support for carbon capture and storage. The province of Alberta is home to one of the biggest and most carbon-intensive oil deposits in the world. Production there has boomed in recent years, showing Canada's progress towards its emission reduction targets is actually it's not really happening. Canada's emission targets are, well, for one, not particularly impressive. Two, who knows what Canada is really emitting. The Quest plant is operated by Shell Canada and owned by Canadian Natural Resources, Chevron, and Shell Canada, and is part of the Scotford Processing and Refining Complex. At Quest, CO2 is removed during the process of making hydrogen gas, which is used in the energy-intensive process of turning the bitumen extracted from oil sands deposits into synthetic crude oil. Canada has among the most generous incentive schemes for carbon capture and storage in the world, according to energy research group Wood Mackenzie. But the industry is struggling to be commercially viable even there. According to Quest's annual report, its total cost per tonne of carbon avoided was $168 in 2022, compared with the carbon price for Alberta's big industrial emitters that year of only $50. So it's costing more than 3 times as much to remove the carbon from the air as what those carbon credits are actually being sold for. Oil sands are accounting for an increasing share of Canada's fossil fuel emissions. And it's actually a little bit shocking to see these numbers. According to documents obtained by Greenpeace Canada in a Freedom of Information request and shared with the Financial Times, Shell originally requested a 3-for-1 deal on carbon credits. Alberta announced the 2-for-1 scheme in 2011 for plants operational before the end of 2015, applying only to Shell and Quest, which started running that year. The bonus fell to 3/4 of a credit in 2022 and was then phased out as the carbon price rose. Shell is in the process of making an investment decision about a second carbon capture plant called Polaris in Scotland. The International Energy Agency has warned that an inconceivable amount of carbon capture and storage will be needed to keep production of oil and gas at existing rates while cutting greenhouse gas emissions. Jonathan Wilkinson, Canada's Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, told the media a 2-for-1 system for carbon credits was probably not appropriate. At the end of the day, the oil and gas sector and the oil sands firms in particular need to get going with respect to emissions reductions. Now, unfortunately, this is just more rhetoric from the current Prime Minister of Canada. I mean, I think it's more talk, all talk and not a lot of action here. Canada's oil sands are hugely emissions intensive. It's not efficient oil production at all. And it's really a state subsidized project. It's these kinds of projects that I think Western countries need to move away from. The truth is, do we really need the oil sands projects that are incredibly energy intensive? Probably not. Moving away from this fossil fuel dependent economy to a renewable economy is something that Canada needs to do. If they don't do it now, well, they're just going to lose enormous amounts of money in the future. Much of the world is moving away from fossil fuels. Can we get rid of them entirely? Of course not. We can reduce our dependence on them though, by moving to a renewable economy. Of course, batteries are energy intensive, but they can be recycled, and they are being recycled. That recyclable material is incredibly valuable. The same goes for renewable energy. Yes, I understand we need oil today, but we don't need anywhere near as much as what we think. Now, I believe if Canada were to incentivize EVs more than they are today, do something like the IRA. I know they have incentives there, but it's nothing in comparison to the incentives we're seeing in the United States and in China. If Canada were to actually sponsor that to a greater degree, they could potentially move away from the enormous amounts of fossil fuels that are being extracted and burnt. Thanks for watching.